Chihuahuas love their family, but one lucky person will be their chosen woman. They'll pick one person and attach themselves like Velcro. If it's you, congrats. You now have a tiny ride or die that follows everywhere.
Some confirm if that's okay. Can you hear me if you're online? Come up or anything like that? Okay.
Then you were muted.
Okay, classic. So for the benefit of those online, all I've done is really describe the site and give a verbal update. So there's nothing more than you wouldn't have seen on the screens. So I'm not going to propose I go back over it, as you would have seen everything you need to see in effect. It's just being the facts about the site so far. Now, mine. Okay. This is the location of the treatment plant, which is the red line area of the site, to the southern point. I've included this because of highways objections. So there's the site location, and then there's collision data there from the surrounding highway network. In particular, the A399 to the west, which is probably the most convenient way in and out of the site, has some key junctions that aren't great and do have some serious accidents on them.
So you can see slide 1.
Okay.
It's got numbers on there, how many accidents or anything.
It's got no numbers. It's got no numbers, but you can see the accidents sort of located by that GIS sort of tab. So where you see a blue box, that's a serious accident. The slight accidents are in green. And you can see there's a couple of other boxes, especially around Brayford Junction, the area just south of that, where there's a couple of accidents just on the same location.
We can't actually see the dates because they're quite small. I wonder if you could just tell us the dates within which that.
Of course.
Thank you.
The collisions displayed from the 1st of the 1st, 2020 to the 31st of the 12th, 2024. The reason I've chosen these dates is because the only information available.
Thank you.
This is just some distances, so it shows you that sort of from the location of the treatment plant, the corner of the site, to the location of the corner of the applicant's field is approximately 98 metres, and then going to the neighbour's corner of their house, so not the corner of their curtilage, but the corner of their house, there's another 50 metres. So the site, the neighbour's house, is 150 metres, but to the boundary of the neighbour's house, it's more like 100 metres. This is showing what is the existing site plan, although you'll note it is part retrospective. So what's existing is what you see in the photos, or what you've seen in the photos. This is the proposed site plan. It shows the plots clearly laid out into 2 separate units. So you've got one static caravan, what is referred to as a day room, and then a touring caravan on site. So it's the standard practice to have 2 caravans on site for a gypsy traveller pitch. So you'd normally expect one static van, and then because of the nature of the work, you would then enable them to have 1 touring caravan. So if you're wondering why there's 2 caravans per pitch, that's why. Oh, apologies. The site isn't laid out like this at the minute. So if the permission was approved, there would need to be some adjustments and works done on site. And you'll also note that my report says the plan's not necessarily that clear in terms of landscaping. So conditioned a series of conditions relating to landscaping, boundary treatments, etc. These are the dayroom elevations. Again, there's a condition relating to slavery in the walls. So the natural materials. You can see the utility room, toilet. These are the main planning considerations. I trust you've all read my report, so I won't go through them in huge amounts of detail. My report effectively says that there is conflict with some policy in terms of the principal development because of its isolated location. There is a minor capital appearance impact. It's not really an impact on residential amenity because of the distance to neighbours, etc. There's no ecological impact, as far as we can tell. The council's sustainability officer has been consulted on that. Third party objection does talk about the need for net gain. However, because it's part retrospective, it has to be treated in the same sort of context as a retrospective application, and therefore it's not in scope for net gain. So there's no exempt, it's not in scope at all. So you can't take a net gain by the statutory 10%. There is some conflict with the local plan and national policy relating to highways due to site's isolated location, the nature of the lanes, etc., leading to the site quite narrow, with some poor forward visibility and some poor junctions. Drainage is okay, however, there's a slight lack of information. The council's environmental protection officer is satisfied that can be dealt with in an appropriate manner. However, some more information on the exact way that the drainage system is going to work will give us more comfort and certainly more enforcement should things not be built in accordance with the plans. Other matters, there are some personal circumstances that need to be considered. And so I just think it's to my other section of the report. There's no impact on archaeological or heritage concerns. Park Authority confirmed that they don't wish to comment due to it being well distanced from a national park. And we don't consider it has an impact on the setting of the park. Police and crime, liaison officer has raised some concerns regarding the location and access to services. And building control said that wheelchair access should potentially be added. Because I am recommending approval. It is finely balanced. So we don't have private house and fire relating to gypsy pitches, which is what I'm giving significant weight to. This slide you can see sort of gives the weights that I'm proposing, which forms my recommendation. However, it would be for members to come to their own conclusions regarding weighting. And that's the end of my presentation. I'll pass back to Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We now come to individuals registered to speak. I believe I have a correct list. So first of all, in support of the application, we have a statement to be read for Liz Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. The statement says, dear committee members, Space supports this application for the following reasons. The local authority had not managed to identify sites in line with the needs that were identified in the previous Gypsy and Traveller accommodation assessments. The 5-year supply of sites cannot be demonstrated at this time. Paragraph 28 of planning policy for Traveller site states if the local planning authority cannot demonstrate an up-to-date 5-year supply of deliverable sites, the provisions in paragraph 11D of the National Planning Policy Framework apply, which means the tilted balance is in play, and in our view, permission should be granted. There is a national and Devon-wide shortage of accommodation for gypsies and travellers. There is nowhere in Devon or wider for them to go. There are children living on the site who will attend in school. It is extremely important for their education to continue unhindered. We understand some members of this family are experiencing significant health issues which require ongoing treatment. Health inequalities experienced by travellers in the UK are significant, partly due to the lack of safe places to stop. The Equality Act 2010 requires that appropriate reasonable adjustments should be made, which we anticipate includes a local planning authority supporting the family to understand the development limitations and planning condition expectations, especially where there might be literacy issues and efforts to ensure that they have a continued safe place to reside. Traveller Space would also like to point out that once travellers become secure on their own sites, the fears and doubts of the local settled population tend to dissipate over time. Arguments about the increase and traffic and small size of the roads seem overstated. Farmers and other rural industry vehicles regularly use oversized machines and vehicles, and there is a quarry very close by. Additional traffic movements of one family do not seem particularly significant. We hope that the planned application goes well for this family, and if they are successful, it will go a tiny way towards meeting the significant needs of sites in Devon and beyond. Many thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. Next in support, we have Joshua Dunn. Mine's off, yeah. When you're ready, please.
Morning, Chairman members. My name is Joshua Dunn and I'm speaking in support for application 81320. I should mention that I have a starter and I thank members in advance for their patience should it be noticeable. Adopted family member within the applicant's Irish travel tradition, I hope to offer some factual context, particularly on a couple of the proposed conditions that may assist members. Some concerns have been raised about 6-foot fencing. The applicant installed these following a safeguarding incident involving his 9-year-old daughter, which he himself disclosed at an extraordinary public meeting, which is therefore a matter of public record. In those circumstances, a secure boundary is a basic safety measure. The fence is under 2 meters in height and would ordinarily be lawful under permitted development. Taken together with other proposed conditions affecting boundaries and site layout, it is important that any changes do not inadvertently compromise the safety of the children living on site. I would also like to draw attention to the lighting condition. As drafted, it requires all existing lighting to be removed within 1 month, but no replacement lighting can be installed until a new scheme is approved. This would leave the applicant and his children without any site lighting for a period of time. That creates a foreseeable safeguarding risk. And because the timing is public, it also creates a publicly known period of vulnerability. I simply ask that members are aware of this practical consequence. One representation challenged the officer's reliance on the 2D moorland edge slopes classification and described characteristics consistent with LCT 3A, upper farmed and woodland valley slopes. The officer report engages with landscape character generally, but does not address the specific classification challenge. I mention this only because landscape sensitivity depends on correct classification, and members may wish to be aware that this point is raised. Thank you for your time. I appreciate the care and attention members give to these decisions. My intention today is simply to provide context that may assist you in understanding the applicant's situation. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. Now we have David Barrow, please.
Thank you. My name is David Barrow. I live in Barnstaple. I am delighted to be able to address this meeting to offer a character reference of Mr. Philip Duran. We first met Mr. Duran in July of last year when he and his team transformed our garden from a jungle wasteland into a really lovely garden which we are now enjoying. The work was carried out to a high standard and very tightly done, causing little or no inconvenience to neighbours and the public. And more recently, Mr. Duran and his team have done improvements to our house, again done to high standards, including painting exterior, demossing the roof, and laminating floor in the kitchen and the lounge. During the work, Mr. Duran ensured that all materials used were stored neatly and that any rubbish was disposed of promptly from our property, again keeping our road tidy and safe for everyone who passed by. We have found, that is my partner and I, a person, Mr. Duran, a person who is true to his word. When he says he will do something, he will do it with honesty and integrity and consideration. To summarise this character reference to Duran, we consider him to be a man of great personal integrity and honesty. It has been a pleasure to have made his acquaintance, and we have also got to know his family, whom I can state categorically he puts above all other considerations. I should add, Mr. Duran has regretfully had some periods of ill health, meaning he has had to spend quite a few periods of time in hospital, both here in Barnstable and in Exeter. Again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to address this meeting.
Thank you very much. Next, we have a number of objectors, starting with Martin Peake, please. What was it? Sorry, we have a change of order on there. My mistake. Stephen Jupp, statement to be read out first.
Thank you, Chair. The statement says, I'm a planning consultant with 37 years of experience dealing with gypsy and travellers sites across the country, both for councils and travellers. Unfortunately, due to existing work commitments, I am unable to attend, but the following statement provides the text that I would have read out. I submitted an objection on behalf of 4 local residents. This statement concentrates on those areas where I consider the case officer's judgments to be in. 2 local residents will concentrate on the landscape and ecology issues from reports that accompanied my objection. On the matter of the intentional unauthorised works that have occurred, the case officer is wrong to place very limited weight on this matter. The December 2025 draft MPPF at DM8 makes clear substantial weight should be attached. 1.15 misquotes the PPTS. They should be strictly limited, a rare exception, not the norm. This site is very poorly located and permission would open the floodgates for similar applications in your open countryside. 1.17, the tilted balance only applies if MPPF footnote 7 doesn't apply, namely the setting of excellent national landscape. Both the landscape expert and CKRE identify landscape harm to the setting of Exmoor, triggering footnote 7, so the tilted balance does not apply. 2.13, the main landscape harm is one of character which cannot be mitigated through landscaping. 5.9 is simply wrong. Clear conflict of highway policies to not reduce just because there are 2 units. Put simply, the roads are not suitable for this use. 7.7, cumulative impacts are valid consideration. Namely, if you grant permission for this reduced scheme, it will be very difficult to refuse a subsequent application for 4 pitches. 8.5, you do not reduce weight on these considerations if there is no 5-year and housing land supply. That is a matter for the overall balance. 8.7, landscape harm to a valued landscape and setting of Exmoor should carry significant weight. 8.8, the ecology reports submitted raise ecology concerns which are largely ignored. 8.9, the pitches will not contribute towards meeting your need as they're not part of it. 8.11, on weight to harms, I conclude principal development significant, highways significant, landscape significant, ecology moderate. These identify harms which should form the basis of refused plan permission outweigh any identified benefits regardless of the tilted balance. Therefore, I strongly conclude that the application should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Roddy, please.
Morning all. I'm Paula Roddy. I'm resident of 20 Years in Charles and in a small rural hamlet. 3 children seeking local housing, culturally fall in the minority group with chronic health condition, non-dyslexic as well. My children have attended the local school and were active in the local community. I too have purchased and renovated a barn. We sought planning permission in advance. I want to highlight what the differences are to what we're hearing. On the Maybank holiday, digger turned up, it went through the hedge. The hedge grew from 8 foot to 12 foot opening, the surface has changed to hardcore, and touring caravans arrived, and about a static caravan arrived, damaging the banks and hedges along the line. Councillor Bullen attended the site, told us to go on to stop and seek planning permission, and a week later, this was followed by pipe laying and drainage. August bank holiday, some more drains came in, and by September 25, we have fences going up, and hotfoot being laid across the ground. September the 12th, second static caravan turned up, but that was a failed delivery, with more stones and more fencing. 20th of November, there was arrival of mobile unit with shower and toilets, more lights, septic tank, more chippings, and the 8 foot lights. The 1st of December, more aggregates. 6th December, 23rd, more aggregates, and by Christmas we had pebbles all over the site, which spread into the lane, making it extremely dangerous. The site changed on the 22nd of January to 8 foot, and extended on 3 sides. And then missed on the 19th in a parish council meeting, Mr. Duran confirmed he was planning to run a roofing business from the site and advertise locally. 11th of March, we saw a gazebo go up in the corner, which was not caught by the planning officer. And April, Easter, there were 17 caravans on that site, most of which I think were used, and multiple generators. In summary, I'm disappointed by the pre-planned and deliberate behaviour, failure to follow policy, and the precedent it sets to other people. And despite being told to stop, there is no guarantee with whatever conditions you in place that will happen. There is a pattern of behaviour being shown here. If we approve it, and if it is approved by this, I think this council and the local community will have deliberate and ongoing issues with this site, which may lead to legal action. And also, I'm concerned about the fact that there are multiple caravans on site and the conduct of the people there. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Martin Peake, I believe.
Martin Peake, objector, resident of Charles, speaking on behalf of the community. This representation on landscape character is informed by our chartered landscape architect, who has concluded that the scheme will fail to protect and enhance a valued landscape. The scheme presents significant landscape harm as it relates to the alteration of the fabric of the landscape. The site can make a positive contribution to one that makes a negative one. To quote Inspector Pleasant in her Peasdale Hill appeal decision, harm to the fabric of the landscape cannot be mitigated through planting. The report fails to take account of the council's landscape character assessment guidelines to protect the DCA's important role as a setting to the national park, the landscape tranquility and remoteness with clustered villages and hamlets creating a strong historic sense of place. The sparse settlement pattern of clustered hamlets, villages and farmsteads, and the settlement's characteristic form. Nor does it address paragraph 189 of the National Planning Policy Framework relating to the setting of a designated landscape, which states, development within their setting should be sensitively located and designed to avoid or minimise adverse impacts. The report cites local plan policies, but fails to explain how the scheme satisfies the following. STO4. Design will be based on a clear process that analyses and responds to the characteristics of the site, its wider context and the surrounding area, taking full account of the principles of design found in DM04, which reads, reinforce the key characteristics and special qualities of the area and contribute positively to local distinctiveness, historic environment and sense of place. DMOA states, great weight will be given to conserving the landscape and scenic beauty of designated landscapes and their settings, and emphasises that proposals affecting Exmoor National Park or its setting should have regard to its statutory purposes, including to ensure its landscape character and natural beauty are conserved and enhanced. The Ofsted report does not explain how this site, within the setting of Exmoor National Park, will further its statutory purposes. Finally, policy DM 30B states that such a development must meet the condition that it does not have an unacceptable landscape, visual or environmental impact. The case officer has failed to take adequate account of local policy and guidance and has acted in error by relying upon conditioned planting landscape impacts, which is not possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, David Morgan, please.
My name is David Morgan. I've lived in Charles for 40 years and lived in North Devon for even longer. I'm here really to speak on behalf of the ecologists that we hired to look into the situation. And we came at it in different directions. The opposite report accepts that the appellant's apology report, and critically, despite being told problems with chartered apologies. The apology report was submitted previously for a different development. It was not updated for this development and the planning deadline bound. Habitat survey was wrong. The report couldn't identify a Devon hedge, so the assessment is only reliable. It does not contain any survey information for protected species, such as reptiles, dormice, bats, and badgers. So it is not possible to make an informed decision on planning policy. The case law says that without sufficient information, legally compliant permission cannot be given. The report is not compliant with North Devon Council's requirement for the wildlife report. While retrospective applications are exempt from biodiversity net rating, the application is only partly retrospective. It has not yet been tested in court. The approach to partly retrospective being treated as fully retrospective. So officer advice is not confirmed by legal precedent. Therefore, biodiversity yet again applies. There's a lot of inconsistencies between the landscape and the ecology reports. The BFG report, design and access report, and site layout. So it's not even clear what is being applied for, so it's not possible to make a fully informed decision. In summary, the application fails policies ST14, DM04 and DM08. We explained this carefully and in detail to the officer, and it is unexplainable why the report said the development was acceptable. The finally balanced decision on other matters, the failure to meet policy requirements for ecology means that the weight is strongly tipped in the direction of the I'd just like to finally mention that in April 2026, just last month, a new countrywide plan to help wildlife and restore habitats across Devon was adopted by Devon County Council Cabinet. How can such schemes be effective if important habitats are not protected in the first place by the policies designed for that purpose? The words of Councillor Jackie Hodgson, Cabinet Member, nature in Devon is under real pressure. Thank you. I'd like to just say on my own part that I think if you look across the country, you will see that the pattern of behaviour is exactly the same in many other places. What we see is people who come into a greenfield site and change it dramatically, cut down hedgerows, resurface it, bring in diggers, trucks, pipes, whatever it might be. This is happening throughout the UK. And I think that if we allow this to happen in North Devon. Not only will the people of Charles and Greyfriars be damaged, I think North Devon will become a target for the sort of behaviour. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you. Next we have Gillian Fu. I pronounced that correctly.
My name is Gillian Lowe, and I am a resident of Charles, a tiny hamlet set within a deeply rural, isolated and beautiful landscape. I am here today because our peaceful way of life has already been significantly harmed by what is, to date, an unauthorised development and occupation. As highlighted in the DCC Highways report, the country roads leading to this isolated location are simply not fit for the level of use being imposed on them. They are narrow, with no pavements or verges, steep to the point of dangerous, with inclines as severe as 1 in 2 and sharp blind bends. Excuse me. These are not roads designed for frequent traffic, let alone the increased movements from school runs, daily domestic use, and a roofing business now operating from site. This is not just inconvenient, but unsafe. Emergency access is severely compromised, something already proven when an ambulance became stranded and had to be towed out. We have also witnessed the intentional destruction of an ancient Devon bank during nesting season, a protected and valuable feature of our landscape and potentially in breach of the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981. This was done to force through access to the site, which is entirely out of scale and character with its surroundings. The harm does not stop there. Harsh, intrusive floodlighting cut through what are dark and unspoiled night skies and disturbing the fragile habitats of bats and owls that depend on this darkness. What has been most distressing is the complete disregard shown for due process. The land was flattened and covered in gravel before any engagement with the planning authority. There was no consideration for biodiversity, no respect for planning principles, and no thought for the community already living there. This site lies in open countryside outside the settlement boundary, where development is rightly restricted. Yet what has appeared is something entirely out of keeping. Caravans and domestic clutter clearly visible, creating a stark and jarring intrusion into a previously unspoilt landscape. And the impact is not isolated, but it is cumulative. The noise, the activity, the constant movement, it has changed the very character of this space. The peace and tranquility that define Charles is being steadily eroded. This is not just about policy, it is about people, place and protection of a landscape that cannot be replaced once it is lost. Government guidance is clear. Decisions about development should reflect the views of local communities. We are that community and we ask you to hear us, to stand by your policies and to protect what remains of this special place. Please refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next we have Howard Tolley, please.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Howard Tolley, resident of Charles. You've heard a wide range of detailed concerns this morning on highways, landscape, ecology, and the conduct of development on this site. I will be brief and focus on the central issue. This application turns on policy and the primacy of the development plan. Under planning law, decisions must be made in accordance with the development plan, unless there is a clear and justified reason not to. Here, there is not. This proposal is for a permanent residential development in open countryside, outside any settlement boundary. That is in direct conflict with the local plan strategy, including policies directing development to sustainable locations and restricting development in the countryside. Most importantly, policy DM30 sets a clear hierarchy for travellers' sites. This site sits at the very bottom of that hierarchy. There is no robust evidence before you that more suitable, sequentially preferable sites have been explored or exhausted. On that basis alone, Policy fails policy, proposal fails policy. You've also heard reference to national policy which encourages the approval of development in certain circumstances. Even under national policy, development that causes harm in an unsustainable countryside location should not be approved. And that is what we have here. The harms are clear and significant. Harm to the rural landscape and setting was excellent. Unsuitable and unsafe highway access. Development reliant entirely on the private car. The introduction of permanent built form into an otherwise undeveloped countryside setting. Now, members, I want to address one important point directly. We fully recognise and respect the need to consider personal circumstances and duties under the Equality Act. Those are important material considerations, but they do not override the development plan. They do not make an unsuitable location suitable. Planning decisions must remain grounded within land use principle. In land use terms, this is simply the wrong place for this form of development. So when you step back, the policy conflict is clear. The location is unsustainable. The harms are significant. And the justification for departing from policy has not been demonstrated. Members, this is not a marginal judgment. Approving this would undermine the local plan, set a clear precedent for development in open countryside.
If you can wind up, please.
For those reasons, I respectfully ask you to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have the agent, Emily Temple, who is joining us remotely. I don't know if you can hear me, Emily Temple, but this is your chance. You have 3 minutes. I can see now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. This application is supported by a detailed transport assessment that addresses highway concerns. This includes removing some existing fencing at the entrance to improve visibility and replacing the gravel with a solid surface. The submitted assessment confirms there's been no collisions in the rural lanes in the past 5 years, including the preferred route from the site to Brayford and beyond. There's minimal traffic generated by the proposal. We've already reduced the scheme from 4 to 2 pitches, and a new dwelling 500 metres away was approved in December 25 with no network concerns being raised. It's important to note the planning policy for traveller sites expects local journeys by travellers to be by vehicle, and that the provision of a settled base is far more sustainable than no base at all. The site contributes to the council's lack of a 5-year supply of pitches. It gives access to health and education facilities that the family need and which are hard to access when living on the roadside. Fundamentally, there are no other sites available, and substantial weight is given to these points. The site is not in a located designated landscape or conservation area, and new planting is proposed and conditioned to mitigate the visual effect. Exmoor National Park do not object. Existing lighting will be replaced. The field gateway on the right of the photo in the report is agreed to be stocked up as this is in the applicant's ownership. Ecological net gain has been demonstrated. Planting within a planting season, so the wording of condition 13 is requested to be varied to refer to the next planting season following the decision. Condition 8 limits preparation, submission and determination of landscaping within 3 months, which is impractical given the council's own 2 months determination period, so an amendment to 12 weeks for submission is requested. The personal circumstances are a material consideration, and case law requires children's needs to be a primary consideration. The settled base means the family can receive treatment from the South Molton Medical Centre. Mr. Duran requires a feeding tube and 3 monthly scans due to a chronic pancreatitis condition. He's under the care of a local specialist dietitian. His young daughter requires a consistent education and is enrolled at the North Molton Community Primary School. His younger son will require schooling when old enough. On the second pitch, his mother suffers from scoliosis and depression, requiring medical regular appointments and medication. His brother is registered blind and is autistic, requiring full-time care from the family. A further personal condition is offered to tie the site to the family. Personal circumstances cannot set a precedent for future development. All applications are assessed on their own merits. I welcome the support from the County Council, the Gypsy Liaison Officers and the Case Officer, and I trust that members will approve this small single-family site development, noting that paragraph 121 of the report states the Council has struggled to find sites elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Councillor Richard Hopley, statement to be read out, please.
Thank you, Chair. The statement says, as the County Councillor and representative for residents of Charles Brayford, I wish to express my strong objection to the application for the change of use of land and the part retrospective application. From the outset, the works carried out in that location have been illegal. The authority were aware from the start of this fact and refused to put a stop to the works, although I requested it on many occasions and much to the detriment of the local residents and the authority's regulations. Local residents abide by the laws and rules of the authority and ensure that the correct permission is sought before attempting to start any construction, alterations or change of use. To allow this application to be approved sets an incredibly damaging precedent, not only in North Devon but county-wide. It is important that all residents appreciate that rules must be adhered to and the correct processes are carried out in accordance to those regulations. This application must be refused for all the reasons mentioned within the statement and ensure that all future applications are processed in accordance with the law and the authority's regulations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Excuse my voice, I will carry on as best I can. That's the end of the registered speakers. And I just remind members of the public that that is the end of the public participation. Next, we have an opportunity for the officer to respond if there's anything you wish to respond to at this time. I'm sure there'll be questions coming your way very quickly. Okay, so we'll move to questions, and I haven't forgotten that after questions, Councillor Bullitt will hear from you. So I'm actually going to kick off with a couple of questions while you have a ponder. Can you just talk to us about presumption in favour and paragraph 11D and the triggering of that, please? And also, I've reread the report while you were presenting and while there were questions, but there's no objection from Exmoor National Park as I understand. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
Yeah, okay. So can you just talk us through the triggering of 11D of the PPS, please?
Testing?
Yeah.
Okay. So as part of the process of determining this application, I've discussed the application of our planning policy team to determine whether we haven't applied the housing land supply relating to gypsy traveller sites. So they've confirmed that we can't demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply because we haven't delivered enough sites, and therefore paragraph 11D is triggered, which results in the presumption of favour in favour arising. There are circumstances if there's significant harm, etc., where 11D wouldn't be triggered. For example, if it was causing significant harm to the natural landscape, a listed building, etc. However, my report concludes that it's not, and 11D would be triggered in presumption in favour, therefore apply. Hopefully that clarifies your question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Did I just say, this is slightly parallel. No, not very good, because we've actually front in the sports shop. So that's better, isn't it?
It's further away.
Are we there?
You take it further away. That makes it easier.
So I just wanted to say that obviously we have the presumptions in favour of sustainable development in terms of the paragraph 11D. So it is engaged. I think one of the objectors have said it's not engaged. But the reason why it wouldn't be engaged if it was a green belt, which we know we haven't got any green belts, is within a national park, which is not. And it's within a national landscape, which is not. It's within an area of risk of flooding, which is not. And there's an impact on heritage assets. So 11D is engaged. So just to make it really clear for members.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And apologies, we've moved to questions a little bit too quick. I have missed the parish council representative, Brian Simmons. So I do apologise, Brian Simmons. If you'd like to make your way forward, you can have your 3 minutes when you're ready. That's question shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. There's lots of things that have been said today, most of them have been covered from our response, but this situation should never be where it is. There was no change of use from a greenfield site to a brownfield site in order to create building. This was done regardless. Also, before construction of anything to do with what they got to do today, there should have been a planning application in like we're looking at now. This was completely omitted and it just carried on, did all the work as you've heard from the various parishioners. The original application was withdrawn and then now a respective planning application is made for 2 gypsy pitches and obviously other accommodation there related to the pitches, but they're still on the same footprint. And the size of the units have increased to fill that pitch. There are many issues that are being covered, various different planning policies, DM14, DM15, DM30. I won't go into all that because we've been told about them anyway. But one thing that Parish Council want to reiterate is that we are a consistent Parish Council. We actually treat everybody the same and go and either view the situation or bring it to a committee and discuss it properly. So at the end of the day, we like to think we're doing the procedures correctly, unlike where we've got to now. Situation really has created many people with a wrong example of what can be done and gives the parishioners the wrong message. And basically, that's where we're coming from. We want the system to work rather than to be broken, because already now there are other people starting work within the Breakford parish. I'm not here to tell you about them, but it gives people the wrong message and we shouldn't be in this situation. I recommend that you reject it, please. That's all I've got to say, because most of the things that were in the report have been talked about by the previous people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. So we're beginning questions, and we'll go to Councillor Metcalfe. Yes, you do.
Right, thank you. That is adequate volume, right. My question to the officer is on page 47, where you've got your balance, and in particular looking at the weight within the balance. I've got 2 questions, and they're based on the highway waste impact which is a significant weight. The first question about this is, you say that significant weight for the highways impact, and we know all the reasons why. However, slightly reduced due to the limited overall movements likely from the site. So I don't know whether that, now that we're aware of the amount of vehicles that are now going there, or that are allegedly going to the site, there and back, plus the fact that we've now got a business being run, would that potentially push that into any other kind of realm of greater weight? And the second question is the next two on the list, which are your amber, so moderate weight, your pressure on the local services and the landscape. Which of those two, which I know you won't change this now, but we as a committee are allowed to kind of have our own balance of weight in mind. Which of those two comes closest to significant?
Thank you, Councillor Mackie. So, first one was relating to highways. Just to clarify, in terms of the business, there's a condition restricting business use. So, I wouldn't necessarily say there were more impacts. However, the highways impact is significant. The lanes leading to the site are poor. They have poor junctions and visibility. There's a preferred route to the site, but we can't really control that realistically by condition. It would be completely unenforceable. And actually, if you come from different ways, up Shoescombe Hill or from further to the south and go through Charles, actually they're really bad. Logically, if you were local, you probably wouldn't drive them in a caravan. And if you did, you might get a bit tied up, I would say. So you could, highways could form a reason for refusal on its own right. I'm not recommending that, but it could. Okay. Latent. The next question was about pressure on local services and landscape / character impact. Tricky question, really. Pressure on local services, it kind of could be interlinked with the principle of development. Because it's the fact that it's in the middle of nowhere, which is the principle of development section, that causes the pressure on the services. So again, that could slide up into that and have very significant weight in that regard. It's a bit of a catch-22 pressure on local services though, because it does allow the applicant access to local services, even though it might arguably be in the wrong location. For example, if they've got herpes, etc., it might be better nearer a town with a doctor. So there's not a perfect answer to that. Landscape / character impacts. Now, we've heard a lot about landscape. My report recommends there's not necessarily significant harm to the landscape impact, but landscape and character impacts are slightly different. I'm not a qualified landscape consultant. The way I understand it in very layman's terms is that if it's causing harm to one of the protected or one of the characteristics which are significant in that landscape, so you've got the landscape character assessment and you've got the special characteristics. So if it's causing harm to one of those special characteristics that can't be mitigated, then in theory there's significant landscape harm. Character and appearance or visual impact is slightly different because it's more of an assessment on site or close to the site. So what I'm effectively saying by report is I don't think there's necessarily wide-ranging landscape impacts on those special characteristics, mainly because the topography of the site is quite. The main harm is when you get there, because you can't really see it from a distance. And then when you get there, there's quite a significant harm potentially to the character and appearance of the area, because that has changed. So that's where there's potential. I would say if you're looking at that, I focus more on the character impact and the landscape impact myself. Probably worth mentioning the retrospective side of things, although it wasn't a question asked, but just quick clarification that again, we wouldn't really give the fact that it's retrospective much weight, if not any, because from an enforcement point of view, that's how that works. I'm sure there's loads more questions I could round up. I'll find a better chair from you.
That's why we've got some other questions from them. So Councillor Coops first, please.
Yeah, two questions. So on the personal circumstances, I see from the conditions that it seems it can be conditioned that it has to be gypsy or travellers on site. It's not conditioned to that it's only for that family. And on sustainability, could you give us some distances, please, to local services?
So personal circumstances, I haven't recommended that to take forward as a condition because we haven't got a private house and land supply of guardianships to travel sites. So if the applicants were to move on, then we still retain plots. So that's why it's not best practice, although it could be done, to condition personal permissions. So that's why. Regarding distances to local services, I think that's a tricky question. It's a mile down Shoescombe Hill to Bray Ford, which has some services, as it sort of says in my report. So that includes the primary school, Bridge Hall. There's a church in Charles, so we would count that as a local service. But actually, if you want to get to the hospital, for example, that's probably a 45-minute drive. South Molton is a 20-minute drive probably. So it is isolated, which is part of the problem. I can't give you definitive times or distances, I'm afraid, just because there's numerous services and samples.
I think an interesting question, isn't it? Because the agent has offered that the condition could be put on to provide use to the family. Obviously takes into account their personal circumstances to make it. Councillor Maddox.
Would the lighting have an impact on the landscape and character? Even if you took away the floodlights and put softer lights in there, with it being open countryside, would that not impact?
There is a condition for that, isn't there?
So in my opinion, a more sensitive lighting scheme would have a very limited impact, whereas so it all depends on the scheme submitted. You could have an acceptable scheme. If there's floodlighting, that's clearly not acceptable because it is on the edge of a dark sky reserve and it is in a very isolated location. So naturally, things are a bit more sensitive to light. But I'm not saying that no scheme would not be acceptable.
And for example, if the softer lighting was out, is that enforceable? Is it monitored? After it went in the sort of planning scheme?
It would likely be enforceable, yes, otherwise the condition couldn't be applied. So to meet the 6 tests of a planning condition, one of those is that it needs to be enforceable. So I believe it would be enforceable, yes.
And then, so we're having had our enforcement training before, how much weight and strength would be if the lighting wasn't done properly, or the lighting did have issues to wildlife or the visual impact. So at the moment, we can't, you say it's not visible from roads or anything like that, but then actually once you've got lighting, it's going to become more visible in the surrounding area at night time anyway.
It's quite difficult to answer hypothetical questions because it depends on how much is breached. So there might be a lighting scheme and we think, God, blimey, that's really bad. We want to enforce that. But they might have a slightly different lighting scheme that's only slightly different to what they've been approved and wouldn't be expedient. So it's a question I can't give an answer to, I'm afraid.
What I'm trying to find out is whether that would bring the weight up from the amber at the moment to give it more.
I wouldn't necessarily focus on lighting as on the weighting, you know, and as I've said in 813, it's a nuanced exercise. And although I've given you the table as a visual guide, it requires careful consideration rather than just a black and white or colour coded scheme.
Lighting is important in the countryside, though.
It is, but there's a condition to limit that.
Thank you. So the next, Councillor Caroline Lee. Microphone's on its way.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for your report. I'm going to go back to the highways. So we know that at the planning committee, we always have to look at the application in front of us. And if it is for 2 units, I don't suppose we've got anyone from highways here, have we? No, that would have been ever so helpful, wouldn't it? Do we know what the evidence base is for the assessment of the harm that the highways department has come up with? Because if it is 2 dwellings, how many vehicle movements is that? It's not set out in the report, isn't it? But I suppose my question is, are we just looking at traffic generated from 2 units, or are we looking at traffic generated if there were, as appears to have, or as has been reported to be the case, up to 17 vans there? I just wondered if we could unpick that a little bit. Yeah.
Absolutely, but it's important to note here that actually highways, they're just objecting. They're not saying it's okay because there's only 2. Highways are just saying we object, end of. So it's me that's saying I'm reducing that weight because there's only 2. In terms of the evidence, the evidence is there when you drive around. So he's talking about inadequate widths, horizontal alignments, the condition of the road, which we all know is poor, unsuitable accommodate increase in traffic light to be generated. So in effect, they're just objecting on the basis of what's on the ground. And we've seen the collisions data. So if Paul was here, I'm sure he would be saying this is just not acceptable.
Thank you. Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your report. You just said you don't like having questions, so I fear this might be another one. I presume I can refer to this, Chair. I presume I can refer to this. Since
You may, but as I said,
it's not.
It's a late
yes.
submission, so only be afforded limited weight. I think actually
that's true.
Slides in the presentation, right?
Yeah. It's just that
clearly enough.
It's just that these drone shots do indeed give you a much better idea of the impact visually. My questions are 2 really, and they also allude to enforcement in a retrospective application like this. Hypothetical one, if this application is refused, what does happen to this site? Because it's looking pretty solid to me at the moment. And the other question is, if the applicants decide to move on, which is a lifestyle they love, and I appreciate that deeply, what then happens to this site? Because it's therefore everything you're talking about becomes academic fiction.
Okay, so, the question of, sort of Dora and moving on, so, I haven't recommended a personal permission, so if they were to move on, it would stay as a Gypsy Traveller site, presumably sold, to another family, of Gypsy Travellers, could even be split and sold to individuals, so, that would be the presumption. Go with the market rate, so there's stuff in the, planning policy for travellers that talks about it being affordable and that we may allocate affordable Gypsy Traveller sites in the countryside, but that it's not, this isn't an affordable Gypsy Traveller site. I asked Devon County liaison officer how that would actually work, and she said really, they're only, if they're owned by the county, etc., it would be quite difficult to have an affordable site. If you were to recommend approval with a condition, that should Dora and his family move on, site be restored to its former condition, then that would be something which we could, look to do, to our breach of condition if that wasn't applied. And they've offered the condition, so it's potential. Regarding enforcement, if it gets refused, again, if that's a question for my colleague next to me, as someone. However, if that we could, in theory, serve an enforcement notice and go through the motions in regards to what that involves.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Chairman. Is it possible to have some clarity on some points to for the members? Some issues in outside and myself. Actually reading the report, which looked quite good. I see within the report there, I read it 8.9, two pitches to meet with the council's local plan requirement, identified need in the district. But am I assuming that will meet the identified need in the district, or is that just a point made?
Which number was that, please?
Well, I saw it. I saw when I read through it. I read through it 1.8.9 something. It said two pitches. The council's local plan requirement identified needs in the district. So does that meet it? Because I thought there's more pitches needed.
There would still be more pitches needed. So there's an overall need for 15 pitches, jointly with North Devon and Torridge. We've delivered 8 so far. So this would be 2. So this would be 2 more, and then we would need another 5 by the end of the plan period. So it's quite a difficult calculation to work out if that would meet the 5,000 hours supply or not. Probably not, because the local plan is coming to nearing the end of the plan period.
Thank you. The next one is, I see you on your report, you talked about blocking of a gate access it was suggested in the blue area. And how you would actually deal with that, because that's not within the red area, which is part of the planning. I mean, how would you deal with the conditioning of that? Can you just show, would it be possible to show the location? Is it on the lower side where it goes down towards the developed houses, existing houses?
Having a slight computer malfunction. So there we go, just needed. Not my touch. So this is the gateway that I'm recommending be blocked up. That is something we could secure in the blue line.
Is it in the blue line?
Yeah.
Can you show whether it's 2 on that plan, and where you probably love blocking it up as possible? Oh, yeah, down that, so I thought it was down there, okay, yeah, I can see the advantage of blocking out there. But you can condition that within red. Okay, thank you. Can you just elaborate a bit about, because I see that you've got conditions regarding the day rooms, and you talk about the pitches. So you've got conditions about the day room and slates on the roof exterior. Can you just elaborate a bit about the pitches, please? What you can locate on the pitches, and also because you've got, I've actually seen the builder on the site previously. I'm just wondering, because there was some concern about what appearance is going to be. Can you just say what goes on the pitches and how you're going to deal with it condition wise, if it's something different than what you, I think, mentioned earlier?
So maybe what's now and what we're granting planning permission for.
Okay, so let me just go.
Because if you see on your plan, you've got a different, if you look at your plan, you've got a different type of building altogether going in there, which is not what you suggested to be earlier, would go on the pitches.
So you've got each pitch, so the site split into two pitches, and then each pitch would have one static caravan, one touring caravan, and then a building which would be used incidentally to the enjoyment of the pitch. So you may wish to add it, if you're worried about the use of that building, you could condition that it's only used incidentally to the enjoyment of the pitch. However, in my mind, it couldn't be used for anything other than that anyway.
I think that needs to be done, but can you show the plan, if you can show the plan, if you don't mind, of the building which somebody's living in now at the present? Because that is different colour, it's grey or something, isn't it?
Picture, okay.
Can you see it on site?
That one?
I can't see it from any of this, far away.
So, yeah, so it's just behind the car. So that technically isn't a building, it's a static caravan.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
That could be on the pitch.
that could be on the pitch along with a touring caravan now.
Okay, but how are you gonna deal with the colour, because there's a colour touch to that as a condition, because you're trying to put conditions on the day room, but there's no mention about what happens to the pitches and what they can do with the pitches, because that's a different colour. Generally, if you had a caravan, you'd have a same type of colour on the site, wouldn't you? But if that's what you're saying now is mobile, that has got a colour touch to it, I mean.
I mean, yes, it's grey with a grey roof, with the Taurus of white. I think it probably might go. So the nature of caravan is not a building or structure necessarily. Okay. So it might go a bit far if we try and start conditioning colour of those, because they're not buildings.
Thank you, yeah. Can also, sorry to keep going on, but quite honest with you, I think it's something we need to deal with. And also, can you just confirm what type of electric supply is on this site? Because I read in the report, someone suggested it's a generator. I'm just wondering, because that's got to create a noise. I'm just wondering, how can that be? You know, what is it, and make sure that it doesn't create an issue going forward, that's all.
When I've been to site, there's been generators. I understand the applicants are going through the motions of trying to get a connection to the grid.
Yeah, but if you're talking about noise as part of a condition, right? I think we need to bottom line out, because quite honest with you, I know that if it's, and that's higher up, and you've got valleys around there, okay? Generators create noise, which actually would have an impact on the people who live within about 150 metres of the other site. So I think I think there's something that needs to be dealt with through a condition, because otherwise we're gonna get a problem with noise.
Okay. So we could potentially time condition connections to the grid, albeit it might be a bit risky, because if for some reason it doesn't pan out, then the store is left with no electricity. Now, there's a couple of things to bear in mind. I think Councillor Lane, firstly, the applicants are living there in caravans, so it's in their interest for it not to be overly noisy, because if anything's got poor insulation and noise suppression, it's probably the caravan as opposed to old stone buildings, etc. that are in the locality. Also, the Environmental Protection Officer has not raised concerns about noise. It is 150 metres from the neighbour. So I get that. I don't get that one. I get that it might have an impact. The impact is whether that's significant, but my job as a planner is to sort of balance up all of the consultee responses who are the experts on that matter, and we haven't got a concern raised relating to noise nuisance.
We ought to deal with the fencing on the entrance. I see you talk about conditioning, you've got to condition that as part of it anyhow. But can you just explain about the fencing on the entrance, what may happen condition wise, and the fencing in on the site? And it means of enclosure between, we talk about enclosure between the two plots, and I'm thinking, why not? It's supposed to be all the same family. Would you have enclosure between the plots? I'm just wondering, are you going to tie that up going forward? Because let's be honest, you wouldn't normally have shiplap fencing out in the countryside, and you wouldn't have shiplap fencing around the perimeter of an area in the countryside. You put a bund around there, wouldn't you? A hedge bank. I'm just wondering, if there's something in the countryside, you wouldn't expect to see fencing around a perimeter. It's alien to the countryside. And surely we should be putting up a bund. I'm just wondering, are you going to deal with that going forward?
I think we're on the same page here, Councillor Lane. I agree with you that the fencing is really harmful to the character space of the area, which is why I'm recommending conditions. Relating to the plot separation, I do think it's important to have a plot separation. If I live next door to my parents, I would want a fence in between, I think. So
I know you see your parents, so I don't.
I think condition 9 does.
Okay, yeah. Can you just explain how you're going to deal with that going forward? Because I think that's very important for this development.
Yeah, I think it's covered in condition 8 and 9.
yes,
9, I think.
So we've got 8, so on page 15. Revision, implementation, and maintenance of detailed plans for proposals, there's on 9. Talks about the hedge bank.
I'll be honest, Chairman, there's a lot of this stuff here should have been dealt with as part of the planning before we come here. So that everybody knows in this room what we're dealing with. You condition everything, which is being dealt with afterwards, which doesn't give anybody who's got concerns it doesn't give any, or me, it doesn't give any security to people who've got concerns, because you're dealing with it afterwards. I think it really would be dealt with before we get to that stage, but that's only my opinion. Yeah, I'll leave it to that, Chairman.
Yeah, please come back, yeah. It was something that I raised as well, Councillor Lane, so, I'm going to, but it can be conditioned, and it's not uncommon to condition it.
It's a lot of conditions.
Hi, Councillor Lane. Sorry. That is something I tried to achieve during the processing of the application. So I did go back to the agent a few times to show and ask that actually the landscaping details, they're not clear, they're not necessarily locally distinctive, and they're not necessarily appropriate for the rural environment. The revised plans that was resubmitted again still weren't to my satisfaction. So it's come to this with conditions. I'm confident that a condition is enforceable and that it is time limited. It would, if we don't like what's submitted, we can just refuse it. So bridge conditions notice. So we can deal with a condition, but I'm in agreement with you. It's not ideal, it's not best practice, but I tried.
Have you come to the end of your list of questions?
Can you do it quick?
Councillor Whitehead, please, next, and then Councillor Maddox after that.
Okay.
We'll draw a question and close off. That's it, Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you very much for the presentation. My question really relates to, again, to 8.9. The application is for 2 pitches only. Does that mean 2 homes, not multiple caravans arriving? It is permission for 2 homes. If other homes arrive, what happens then? That's my first question.
Okay, so I can confirm it relates to 2 pitches, which is 2 homes. Now, the condition you'll see that I've recommended, it does allow each pitch to have 2 caravans on it. So that's because Gypsy travellers live a nomadic lifestyle, they effectively have to have a touring caravan on their pitch. That's best practice. So there's a static caravan which enables them to have their home. And then it also allows a touring caravan for when they go travelling. So that's why you may see more than 1 caravan, but it would be a maximum of 4 caravans.
Okay, right. If I can also ask, there's been reports from the members here present, the public here present, of a business being run from the site. Now, a business would mean increased traffic, considerable traffic, depending on obviously the type of business. Can I ask you, is that business actually allowed? Is it authorised? Is it registered?
The applicant is a tradesperson, in the same way that many people are tradespeople. So he does go back to his home at the end of the day with a van. My understanding is that he doesn't have goods, etc., delivered to the site. He just gets them delivered direct to the customer site because that would be the most practical way of doing it. And I am recommending a condition which ensures that no businesses, etc., or storage of goods is run from the site. So I don't think it's any different to someone living in a normal house and being like a plumber or an electrician or in this case a roofer.
Okay, obviously my concern is the traffic on the lanes. Everyone else is concerned about the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maddox? No? And that? Snag in there.
It was just on the noise pollution, because you said that no issue's been raised, but I've just seen, looking through the report, that residents raised concerns of noise from the generators travelling up to 3 miles. In the meeting.
Okay, so I can only go by the technical consultee on this matter, which is environmental health. They're saying there isn't a noise concern or there's no issue. So I appreciate objectors may have different opinion. But if there was a noise nuisance, then there would be separate legislation which we could pick that up with, so that our environmental health team could come out, do noise monitoring, and then serve an abatement notice should it be an issue. So I appreciate there may be concerns, and but my hands are kind of tied because our own environmental health officer, who's the expert on the matter, isn't raising it as an issue.
So Maddox, so last question, then I think. Do we?
So if the environmental officer is saying that there's no noise impact, but the local people are saying there are, who planning committee should we be listening to?
Technical consultancy, I would say. You can give some weight to the locals, that's fine, but we are protected by third party legislation. So if there is a noise nuisance, genuinely, they should contact environmental health. We can go around, part of monitoring, and then ascertain that.
Thank you. So we will now go, thank you very much for the questions. We will now go to the for the ward member, Councillor Bullen. So you called in the application and I won't read it out, but it's there on page 15. Just to remind you. So Councillor Bullen.
Can you hear me now? Good. Oh, no, I'm on. You don't use this honestly. Yeah, thank you for saying. As you can see, my call in is actually on the submission anyway for you to read. And as you know, the planning officer considered all this and the balance required to reach his decision and the numerous restrictions, restrictive conditions he's going to put on it, which should allay a lot of the fears of those who've spoken earlier. This particular, say, the business use, to be restricted on business use, no business use on the site, etc., etc. All along, I've explained at the parish council meetings that planning applications and decisions are policy led, and they're not primarily by residents' opinions, but they're taken into consideration. And as you know, whilst I'm here, any application result of any sort will be a minor inconvenience to some, but to others can be life-changing, and that's what our job is. I bring this committee so a decision made is transparent and decided publicly by the unbiased members of the committee. The public will hopefully then maintain their confidence in the planning system and see that all are treated fairly. In addition, since I called it in, I've been approached by not only those in Brayford Parish, but in the wider North Devon community as to what this application is actually for. And this has just been mentioned just now, actually. I bring this up as there appears to be some confusion generated by some inflammatory and inaccurate press reports and rumours that are flying around that this is for a transit site. So then numerous caravans will be accessing the site and therefore considerably adding to the road traffic. Whereas this, as you know, is for a settlement site, which is different, for a small traveller family unit wanting to settle to access education and more long-term regular healthcare, which is already being accessed at this time. I hopefully the outcome of decisions today will allay those concerns that have been addressed. As I've been involved in liaising with all involved in this application since day one, and it was mentioned earlier by one of the speakers that I visited the site on day one. I met Mr. Doran and he assured me that he was already applying for planning permission at that point. But obviously he was getting on and doing some work unapproved, which he has been recommended to stop, but going forward, that will be alleviated, hopefully. And I feel that in order for the committee's decision to be clearly independent and unbiased, as ward member, and I've been involved in it from day one, I think it's probably appropriate at this point where I leave the meeting and leave you guys to make your decision. Thank you.
Councillor Bullen, it's noted that you are leaving the room. We have a request for a comfort break, so a really quick comfort break. Okay. 11:43. Okay, members. 11:49. So we closed off questions and we've heard from Councillor Bullen. So we'll move into debate if anyone would like to. Peter Lever.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I think just a couple of things to say that about the landscape of visual impact, which has come up quite a lot. The first thing I think in relation to these really helpful photographs that we've been handed, that they are useful in showing the effect of the development on landscape character. But I'm cautious about using the drone shots as a way of illustrating visual effects, which are effects on visual amenity of people living and walking around the place, because they are aerial photographs. And my experience, having driven around those lanes, is that the high hedge banks actually provide a lot of visual screening. Once you get away from the actual perimeter of the site, visually it's not very noticeable. The other couple of things is there's a lot of talk been said about the effect on the setting of Exmoor National Park, and the fact that this is in a valued landscape because it's within the setting of the park. And I must admit that from reading the design and access statement and the independent landscape architect's report, I couldn't. I mean, the site may well be in the setting of the national park, but I couldn't see anything that said what the actual harm to the special qualities of the national park were from this development. And I think lighting has been brought up, and I think that Exmoor is a dark skies reserve, and this would have an effect on that. So, one of the things I'll be thinking about is the effectiveness of a condition to deal with the lighting on site. And similarly, I'm not sure that I've seen anything in those reports that would convince me that this is actually a valued landscape. I think just the fact that it is located close to the national park boundary, I'm not sure that that's enough to convince me that it's a valued landscape, as paragraph 187 of the framework. Thanks.
Thank you. Can I come back to you on that? Because our officer's given it limited to moderate weight. Would you be broadly in agreement with that? Your own view, or would you have it? Would you have it as a lesser weight?
I mean, there are clearly, quite large local impacts. The development is very much out of character with the rest of the area. So I think low to moderate weight is reasonable.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Weaver. I don't see any hands. So you'll be aware, and it's been made very clear that this is finely balanced. Officers' words. Balance is set out clearly in your report. Should you wish, you can change that balance, but at the moment, that is the balance that has been offered to us by our officers. I've seen two members that would like to speak. I've got Councillor Lever and then Councillor Cooper. So, Lever.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you, Chair. So I'm looking at the conditions, and and forgive me if I've missed something, but condition 3, it talks about the site shall not be occupied by any persons other than gypsies and travellers as defined in Annex 1, etc., etc. Is there something here which limits it to this particular family? Because we've heard about the particular personal circumstances of this family and the health needs and concerns for this family.
I think I can probably not say it doesn't limit it at this moment in time, although we heard from the agent earlier on that they would offer that up.
So I think in terms of, we need to try to balance the needs both of residents but also of the applicants. And, in the planning balance, we've got, moderate to substantial weight in favour being given to the applicant's personal circumstances, including health, access to education and the best interests of children. I wonder whether we could strengthen conditions so that it is related to this specific family, and rather than it being something which could be then setting a precedent for general applications of this site across North Devon and wider.
I think it can be conditioned, I'll let the officer come back. The wording exactly.
It could be conditioned. I think rather than varying that particular condition, you'd almost want to add in an additional condition relating to personal circumstances. And if that were being taken forward, we would ask that the particular wording was delegated to officers to agree with chair and vice. Tracy just wants to come back because I was
So just on that, so obviously the case officer hasn't put a personal condition on, but the planning agent obviously has divulged complex medical issues of this family, which isn't in this report for obvious reasons. If members consider there is exceptional circumstances in this specific case on medical grounds, then you obviously can put more significant weight. And obviously you can consider a condition of limiting the occupation of these pitches to the applicant and, his dependents.
I guess, thank you. And I suppose further to that, because we've also heard from local residents about large numbers of vans turning up on particular occasions and actually the impact of that, not only just keeps dying, not only on the site specifically, but also that will have an impact on the highways. And as we've already heard, highways are objecting just irrelevant of many pitches. Thank you very much, Chloe. Thank you. Let's try this one. So there is concern both, but I have to say it is really, really difficult, this one. Trying to balance all these various different things out. So my concern is both about the how to limit the use of this pitch. And I think this goes back to some of the questions that were asked about what does a pitch actually mean? Does it mean, you're only allowed to have one static and one touring caravan? Are there any restrictions that can be put on additional vehicles? Is there anything about, however many works vans there might be, stuff like that? And I think there's also, I have to say, I am quite concerned about the light, because floodlights in this location just feel completely inappropriate. And from what we heard at the beginning of the representations made, I would be hopeful that a considerably less lighting, a darker, softer approach could be taken. And what was the other thing I was going to say? Yes, I know what it was. That if I would be pleased if we could come up with an additional condition about limiting it to this particular family. And then that raises for me the question about, and then what in 5, 10, 15, 25 years? Is there a time limit on this? Is this for perpetuity? Where do we sit with that?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. I'll start, and Chris may want to follow just in time, so I haven't caught everything that you want. So obviously, I think Chris went into quite detail in terms of what each piece consists of in terms of static and touring caravan. And condition 4 does sort of set that out in terms of what's allowed, and no other caravans shall be stationed on the land. In terms of lighting, we have asked within 1 month that all existing external lighting shall be removed, and that the details of any external lighting needs to be submitted and approved by us. And we probably would do that with other technical consultees. Sorry, what was that? So in terms of the personal condition, if you felt that in this case that there is exceptional circumstances in relation to the applicant, the framework, National Planning Policy Framework, does allow you to look at personal circumstances, and that there is complex medical issues where they do now need to have a pitch, We can condition the limit of the occupation of that to the applicant and his family. If you feel that actually this isn't an appropriate location for a wider traveller site, we would then, once that's use ceased, have to put that land back to where it was. Or if you consider actually it is okay for a traveller site in general, then obviously we would leave condition 3 on there. So it would be depending how you're seeing this. Are you seeing this as an appropriate site for 2 traveller pitches? Or do you feel that there is significant weight in terms of the personal circumstances for this applicant where you perhaps wouldn't see it as appropriate as a wider traveller site, but perhaps appropriate in these personal circumstances? I think that's something for you to have a think about. Chris, I'm sure will mop up anything that I haven't included.
The only thing I want to mention is it's actually in our agenda at item 9, so don't want to turn to it, but I'll read it out. We recently served an enforcement notice on a caravan in the countryside. They weren't gypsy travellers, however, they did have quite considerable personal circumstances, which the inspector gave great weight to, and he allowed the appeal, quashing the enforcement notice, and we could use a similar condition. I'll read the condition out now. The development hereby approved shall endure for the development, excuse the name of the people here because that name will change. Development hereby approved shall endure for the benefit of Mr. and Mrs. R and A Petch only at such a time that the mobile home is no longer occupied by Mr. or Mrs. R and A Petch. The residential use hereby permitted shall be discontinued. All associated development shall be removed from the site and the land shall be restored to its former condition within 6 months of the date of last occupation. So that type of condition has been used by HINS very, very recently to secure personal circumstances on a site.
Sorry, could I just?
You're going to come back? Yeah, we'll just wait for the microphone.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's very helpful. And I was actually thinking about that particular enforcement case while I was thinking about this. So in this family's case, we've heard about medical concerns and treatment and so on and so forth, which if it were my family, I would be concerned about. But we've also heard about the need for schooling for young children, and it sounds as though one is too young yet to be at school. So how do I put this delicately? That kind of condition is for a family where the occupants are perhaps more senior, where perhaps it is expected that occupation will cease within a relatively not all that long time period, and that this family is a bit different. So I wonder how that wording could be adjusted. And actually, because my feeling is that if the medical aspect is what is the concern, rather than whether kids can get to school or not, because as we know, kids get to school from all over the place. So then we get into the whole question about, okay, if and when those medical concerns are no longer a concern for whatever reason, would that then mean that the family would need to vacate the site and it be returned to its original state?
No, not in the wording of that condition, they would, and I think that would be problematic.
Well, yeah, this is what I'm thinking about. How would that be adjusted to these particular circumstances? Because if I'm honest, I don't think this feels like an appropriate site for a traveller site, and that because of the highways objections, because of the various other impacts that we've been hearing about, but at the same time, this family has a real and current need. So I'm trying to balance those, and I'm not sure I'm there yet in deciding what I'm going to do.
It's very difficult to predict the future in terms of people's health, and I don't know the details of the applicant's health issues, but that's a tricky question to ask. I think you have to be satisfied with the information that you've been given at this moment in time, whether you can accept that and allow them to live in their family members on the 2 pitches. I think that is quite clear. first question, so condition 4, I think that's quite clearly what's being written. Does get pretty. So I've got councillor Coombs, councillor Lloyd, and then councillor Booth.
Yeah, whilst acknowledging the health concerns, I think this site doesn't feel appropriate, and it probably doesn't feel appropriate with those health concerns, given the distances to medical facilities, and if medical facilities needed to come there, I think ambulances. They're concerned obviously with the highways, and it sounds as though there's nothing that highways will consider could alleviate that situation, that it's carte blanche, that they don't believe this is an appropriate site. And also, I obviously raised before about the noise impact, and it doesn't seem as though we've got any time frame or any definite whether they will get any type of grid connection. And that obviously could become a long-term problem. So I do have concerns, and I do wonder whether the highways impact should be weighing higher on this application.
Thank you.
So I think, do you want me just to come back on those few bits or there? So in terms of the highway objection, you're right, councillor Hughes, it is for you to balance that. There is an objection on the table, so you need to balance that in the weighing of it. In terms of the immunity considerations, we haven't got a technical consulting objection, so we would need to understand the reasoning in terms of the reason of refusal when there is no technical support from the environmental health officer to say there is a noise impact here. So I would suggest just having a think about that when you are balancing all these issues up.
Councillor Lloyd, please.
Thank you, Chair. Is it possible for you to bring up the slide on page 28, I think, which shows, or 29, will be on our book, which shows the blue and red lines and also the site. I think those of us with an iPad can actually enlarge nearly there, next to it. Oh, well, you haven't got what I've got. On our iPads, we can see the site itself.
There's a site layout plan.
Yes.
So much. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, well, we can enlarge that, and I suppose that's the answer to my concerns about the drone footage. I take Councillor Peter Lever's point on that entirely. That's why I brought up that issue earlier. It's an artificial site, but this shows us exactly what is planned, and we keep asking. Some of us keep asking the same question. That shows the two plots. There's no space there for an inundation of caravans. I'm happy with that as such. In terms of my response thus far, I'm happy with the robust nature of the conditions, particularly 8 to 11. We can be dubious interpretation of whether those will be effective. My interpretation is yes, they will be effective, but there will be delay. I am happy with the fact that Natural England, Exmoor National Park and the NDC Sustainability Officer have not made negative comments about this application. In terms of this, whether or not it's an ideal site for a GNT site, I'm aware that we have 8 local sites in Northern Devon, yes, for 1 to 3, and all of them are in the countryside. So as far as I can see, and therefore where will be an alternative site that is suitable for the applicant. Well, this is most definitely retrospectively work in progress. When it's tarmacked and laid out as we see there, it might well be termed an ideal site for G&T. Site for G&T satisfaction. Yeah. Yes, so it is a complex application and we've had excellent input from both sides. So thank you. Those would be my comments. Thank you, Chair.
We're not moving a recommendation at this stage, I take it.
I daren't, but Councillor Ballott's next to me.
Well, we've got Councillor Booth to follow and then Councillor Lane, so let's hear from them. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say how much I appreciated Councillor Bullett's speech. I thought it was really useful. On highways, I think many of us live down muddy lanes in North Devon, and it's a generic problem that we live in very unsatisfactory transport systems, which are dangerous, but we still live there anyway. That's the nature of this county. As regards the national park and its setting, have a nuclear power station to the northeast, which is part of the setting. That's a rather more significant thing to look at than this pair of pitches. But my main point, I think, is I would just want to remind us that, as we've heard from the police officer, TDC and NDC have a requirement for 15 pitches for travellers, and we have delivered 8. So it's a way of saying I think might be a mistake to make this a personalised approval rather than a permanent one for future travellers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just wondering, was there actually a noise impact assessment carried out on this site?
Not as far as I'm aware, Councillor Lane. No.
So that actually is just a comment from the environmental health, not supported by anything, of course. So it becomes an issue. To me, Chairman, because we got all these conditions attached to this development, my view is, to be honest with you, at this stage, I wouldn't be supporting it because I would like to see the information in front of me, because there's a lot of information which you're trying to tie up as conditions. And all you should say, you can come back if it don't come forward with these conditions, but I would like to see these conditions in advance of any decision being made. So I'm going to be honest with you, I won't be supporting this application as it stands, because I think we need the information in front of us. In regarding there's been no mention of this, but, and I was mentioned just now from councillor behind me regarding the size of the site, I would really suggest to the committee that this site is really, now that there's, because I think there was originally 4 pitches there, now there's only 2. You can nearly class this as an over-extensification of the site, which I think is, if the site was smaller in size, it may be a bit more acceptable. To me, because you got a size of this site, and we can only deal with an application as it stands, of course, it could lend itself for someone else happening in the future. But anyhow, to me, this site is plenty big enough, and it would be suitable if it's smaller in size, and for the reasons I'm considering, I wouldn't be considering it at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Okay. I can't see any hands, so I'll chip in here. It's certainly an interesting application to assess, and I think the report is well written. And I think balances as set out on page 47 are as right as they're going to be. My only question, putting aside the negative weight being applied to the principle of development of the highways, I think we all appreciate that this isn't an ideal site, but is there ever an ideal site? And the fact of the matter is, the NPPF is triggered. So we have to take into account the delivery of the 2 permanent pitches. They are permanent pitches. So I think on balance, I will be aligned with Councillor Knight's thoughts, which I think he nearly came to, and would actually move the officer's recommendation for approval. But, and this is where I differ with Councillor Boone, I appreciate there is an under delivery. If there's only 8, this could be an additional 2 and there'd be a shortfall of 5, but it would in effect buy us some time to find other sites that may become available and may be more suitable. So my moving the officer's recommendation would actually be on to condition tying to the family and their dependents, and I'd leave the final wording of that to the officer and they can come back to me. So I think first off, I would look for a seconder for that. So I did see Councillor Knight first. So you'll second that. A very difficult planning, and a very difficult planning committee. We've got to balance these things up, and I'm very much with Councillor Lane. I would have much rather seen a detailed landscaping proposal now with materials, with species, densities, depths and the like, that we could have approved with the plans. But we haven't had that before us. So we've got to make the decision on what's there. And I feel that it is adequately conditioned. And I think there will be a lot of pressure, certainly put on Councillor Bullitt if there were future contraventions and those conditions, assuming their discharge, weren't followed correctly. So I'm satisfied, but not ideal. Again, the conditions do cover off all those items. In terms of environmental health, I've had personal experience with noise monitoring and they are excellent. So I think our council will again deal with that. Generators have moved on in technology. You don't have to have noisy generators now. So yeah, on balance, I'm moving that, and thank you for, do you accept the variation of condition, because that is a convention in terms of that addition, sorry, the additional condition in terms of tying it. Are you happy with that?
Can I just?
Yeah, and sorry, the officer did add the drainage condition at the beginning of the presentation.
Say something else.
Yeah, please do.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to come back to my original question, which was regarding what would happen if the applicants were to move on. And the users said that this could go onto the open market. So if that would be the default, then what you're saying is more specific. If that's the case, then yes, I will accept your.
My understanding is the site would have to be put back to the state that was in previously.
I understood it was used a site that could be put on the open market for sale. To a gypsy.
No, that's if it becomes a permanent rather than tied to the family. That's my understanding.
That's why I accept your change of conditions.
Yeah. There were others feel free to mention afterwards, but there were a couple of conditions in terms of the planting that were also mentioned by the agent. Condition 13, which was planting, within the next season, and then 12 weeks.
What was that, 1913, and that was going to?
So within 6 months of the date of the decision. So if should it be approved, would be May, June, July.
Can we draft some conditions and pass them to the of the recommendation.
We'll be happy with that. So, Tracy Blackmore's just suggested that the draft conditions come to myself and the board member in entirety before they're agreed, the decision comes out. So from my point of view, I'd like to cover off the landscaping, whether that's realistic in terms of implementing it within 6 months of the decision, but also the wording of the entrance. Absolutely. The drainage. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. I think, I mean, really to keep some faith of the local community, the time pressure on those conditions, on the stuff where I think the case officer's been trying to get details and hasn't been able to get them. I think we ought to keep that time pressure on, and so I think having those details really within 2 or 3 months is something that we ought to be pushing for. I mean, even if the implementation is conditioned for slightly later, but we need to keep that time pressure on. I think.
Okay, that's understood. I'm okay. Yep. Caroline Lever.
Thank you. This is probably within the landscaping plan, but the visual impact of the new entrance, which has been punched through the existing hedges, considerable, and it feels pretty inappropriate, frankly. It's, as has been expressed by others. So I'm hoping that within the condition for the landscaping, that actually goes back to something which is A, more traditional, and B, doesn't glare like that physically. I mean, that just looks like.
Yeah, that's certainly something that the officer will.
He's dealing with there. So I've just got my phone ringing into my hearing aid. Sorry, it's slightly distracting. And there's another point which I've just lost. Anyway, I suppose the other thing just to mention is that, you know, we're looking at your paragraph 11D, I think it is, has been triggered. But I suppose it's worth noting that North Devon actually is ahead of the game in terms of many other districts, in terms of provision for gypsy and traveller community, in that we have a pretty large toleration site down at Seven Brethren. So I think, which obviously is more time limited, it's not something that, I mean, people can be there for a couple of weeks, but it's worth just noting that and keeping that in the back of our minds. But I was looking at the site, the indicative site layout, which was up on the screen there, and then trying to compare that with the photographs of the site. And I have to say, from looking at the scale of these are going to be absolutely immense. We have caravans looking at that, because if we look at the photographs of the site, that it doesn't match. So I think it goes back to what Councillor Lane was talking about, in terms of this was originally going to be put forward for 4 pitches, and now it's for 2. Is there a way of trying to ensure that the site layout, when it comes in, before it can be agreed, actually uses the space in a way which is perhaps less, it is more in keeping, let's put it like that, it's a bit more in keeping with the local area?
We had the plan submitted as part of the application. This is the plan. It's the landscaping, the boundary treatment. There's a big issue, but.
So they are still caravans. So the definition of a caravan is defined by the 1960s and 1968 Caravan Sites Act. And that allows quite generous sizes, probably much larger than what's actually shown there. So they're not insignificant structures. So as long as they are within those limits and definitions, then they would be acceptable on the site.
So presumably then that would be, again, wouldn't it be helpful to have the highways officer here? that might also feed into their objection to this in terms of impact because of the size of the vehicles that we're talking about?
Not necessarily, because the statics, they would stay on site. They would be impractical to move on and move off. So it'd just be the touring caravans that are enabled by condition 4. So it'd be, each plot would be allowed one touring caravan each. Touring caravans have to be towed by a vehicle, so they are limited by weight to 3.5 tons of thing plus vehicle. So that would.
And forgive me, so the day room, is those the little yellow bits at the top of it? So we actually talking about 2 day rooms or
One each.
one each on each pitch?
Thinking of what Councillor Lee was saying, this is what leads me back to some of my problem with the highways, is that you're not conditioning, you're not saying about how many people could be on site. And with the sizes of these caravans, potentially you could have quite a few people in these caravans leading to more vehicles.
Wow. So there is a highways objection, so that's just one thing to bear in mind. Yeah, in theory, there could be more cars, so they would drive to school, for example. The applicant and his wife might have a car. Their sons or daughters, when they get older, they're still in the family home, then they may also get a car. But that has to be seen in context of they are effectively in a home, so you've got 2 plots, each with a home on. But there is a highways objection. That's important for me to stress, because I don't want to say there isn't highway impact, because there is a highway impact.
Okay, members, I don't see any hands. Elaine.
Depending which way the committee decide to go, there was some mention earlier regarding the day route. And I believe you mentioned about it, maybe it being tied incidental to the pitch itself, because I think what we don't want to do is start using that as a residence. Well,
yeah,
because that's what's going to happen, because that's basically what you've got is two plots here, 2 pitches. So you need to make sure that one filter allows something else. Thank you. That's a decision for the rest of the committee.
Well,
Thank you.
I'm happy to take that on in terms of the conditions, because it's not me.
I think that would be, whichever way you want to go.
Thank you very much for picking that up, but I think you're absolutely right that can be. Yeah. So, my understanding, we got the officer's recommendation, that's what I'm moving, seconded by 9. The conditions will come back to myself, Councillor Bullitt, and agree with our officers, and that will include the drainage condition. I think the incidental use are very useful. The trigger timescales in terms of submitting information, as Councillor Lever says, should stay in, but realistically, when they're implemented, needs to match seasons in terms of planting, but to put pressure on the applicant to put the right level of information in them and then be discharged. And obviously that it's tied to the family. I say obviously that was proposed. So we're going to take that to a vote.
Can I just go back on that, just so I'm clear? Just so I'm absolutely clear. Is that better? It is switched on.
Yeah.
Just so I'm really clear, so we've obviously got your recommendation set out for you in terms of the Mr. Reading and officers recommended for a gypsy traveller site in terms of condition 3. You're considering that actually it should be a personal condition for the applicant or their descendants. Is descendants the right word? Dependents, yeah, dependents. But then once that ceases, are you then wishing for the land to go back? Are you happy still to retain that as a gypsy site? I think that's what I need to be really clear on.
I want to be clear that it should return back. And obviously, if they want to put, someone else wants to put another application in, and things haven't moved on in terms of pitches, then we'll consider that application on its own merits.
Yeah, that's what we wanted to say.
But yeah, no, absolutely clear that it returns back to how it was. Okay. So we'll move to the vote. So all in favour to recommend approval, subject to those conditions.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
And those against?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Any abstentions? No, that's carried. Thank you. We'll just take a very short comfort break again, just to let. Stretch your legs. So we move on to item 7, application 81305, land adjacent to Victoria Pleasure Grounds, Wilder Road, Ilfracombe, repositioning of telephone box to be used as an art installation or information point. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. So this is application 81305, repositioning telephone box.
So I'm really sorry, if it's pointing out to you're there, we can't hear. Let me, excuse me, that's lovely to be able to hear what you've got to say.
Good?
Yeah.
So yeah, application 81305, the repositioning of a K6 telephone box to be used as an art installation and or information point. Here is the location plan. It's going to be located adjacent to the Victoria Pleasure Grounds in Ilfracombe. Wildersmouth Beach is visible and Capstone Hill is just north of the site. Here's an aerial view with the red outline being the location. So the existing telephone box is at Northfield Road. It is at the junction between Northfield Road and Wilder Road. It is noted in 9.2 of the Ilfracombe Conservation Area Appraisal. So it's identified. So it does show its heritage value that it possesses and the potential positive impact it can have on the conservation area. As you can see where it's currently located, the public benefit isn't maximised. It is quite recessed and quite hard to see, especially on a sunny day like this, where it's in the shade. Here is the current image of the condition of the K6 telephone box. As you can see in the picture, it is in quite bad disrepair. Paragraph 8.5 of the Ilfracombe Conservation Area Appraisal encourages that historic street furniture such as this is preserved, and with this proposal it secures that preservation. Here is the existing platform where the K6 telephone box is proposed to be located. And here is a site in context with the rest of Wilder Road and going further into Ilfracombe. Just to give a bit more context, there is Capstone Hill in the rear of that picture. So the telephone box will be visible from a large range of vistas, but this is beneficial as it is going to serve as an art installation or information point. This is taken from Capstone Mini Golf. So it does show the extent of the views where it will be visible from. And as an art installation, this is what you'd like. And here's just a block plan highlighting the dimensions of the telephone box. Here's a artist's impression of what the box will look like. Despite the size in this picture, it does still sit well, I think, within the context and does not detract from the conservation area. Therefore, it complies with policy SD 15 and DMO7. The key considerations with this application were the principle of development, the design and impact on the heritage, amenity, ecology, flood risk and drainage, and highways. With regards to the principle, policy Ilfracombe, so Ilfracombe Spatial Vision and Development Strategy and SC22 provide the principle for development. The design and heritage, there's no identified harm to the conservation area, and after it has been refurbished, it is likely to enhance the conservation area. With regards to amenity, there's no identified amenity concerns. It's in a public space, so that is disregarded. Ecology, due to the scale of the proposal, despite there not being a gain, it isn't seen that the scale is big enough to require a net gain. Flood risk is acknowledged that it is within flood zone 2 and a critical drainage area, but where it is going to be located is already an impermeable surface. So that is also disregarded. Highways, there's no highway safety or parking provision concerns with this proposal. So to conclude, the proposal complies with all the relevant planning policies, and I have recommended approval.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I don't have speakers on this one. Okay. Before I come to the ward member, we'll just see if there's any questions, if that's all right. Any questions?
Yes, it's probably not a planning question, but I'm looking at that picture of the of it in its context.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if at any point it might be painted to look like a TARDIS, because that's what it looks like to me. And I think that would be quite fun. But anyway, that's maybe a rhetorical question. Should I just pass this directly to the
I
board?
think if no one else has got any questions, we should hand over to Councillor June Williams.
Thank you. Right, thank you, members. The idea of a TARDIS is quite an interesting one. Are you volunteering to paint it?
Yeah.
Right. No, as I say, all joking apart, this is a use of a box, a telephone box, which at the moment, like the officer has said, is not in a very good condition. It's not in an appropriate place of residence. So it will now be brought into the public realm. People can look at it and admire it, as we all do with items such as this. Unfortunately, we all know that the life of a telephone box is not at the moment something that we use on a regular basis. Unfortunately, those days are gone, but this will put it back into a use that the community can enjoy. It will be used, as the officer has just pointed out, for the community. We have got, dare I do a bit of advertising, we have got the art festival coming up soon, and obviously will eventually be used to publicise events in and around Ilfracombe. So I would just ask members to support this application. Thank you. Yeah, could I propose, sorry?
You certainly can. Do we have a second there? Councillor Maddox, first up. You want to add something, Councillor? Yeah, to do with the colour, the height?
Why, you're talking about a centre. Yeah, Chairman, I'm just wondering, is there any proposal to change the colour of that? Because not being funny, but it looks like a sore thumb to me.
There is designated red for telephone boxes, and it isn't that.
I think if you look at Philly, I think somebody will obviously knows Philly, but if you look at Philly, it's a different colour up there, which is a bit more sympathetic to the area. And if you look at that there, do you think that's sympathetic to the area? That's all.
Yes.
speak.
I think it's a globally recognised piece of street furniture in the red, so I think as red, it will be acceptable.
Councillor Bullen.
Just a comment to say that, I've got one in my ward, which is back in a corner like this one currently is. And it's a night, we can't get round behind it to paint it, so it's deteriorating at the back. So this will preserve it a lot longer because you can get right round it to paint it. And it's quite cheap to get the proper paint to do it because we've just redone ours.
But you can say you got one in your own front yard.
I should be so lucky.
Okay, so we'll move to the vote. All in favour? That's unanimous. Yeah, thanks very much. So those of us that have an interest in the before, please do that. You will have noticed an absence of Vice Chair Peter Bishop today, because he's not very well. So I'd like to move that Councillor Lane chairs this next item. You can suggest someone else. There's a lot of corroding going on.
I'm happy to second.
So Councillor Lee was seconded. So if everyone in favour, please just quick show of hands. Oh, look, you got to be done. Can I vote against?
Thank you.
No.
Are you not?
Coming up to 1 o'clock, please, just in case.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, thank you, members, for your great support. If we can move on to the next application, please, which I believe is it 81262? Or officer could report on that, please, that would be good, thank you.
Testing. Hello. Oh dear. So thank you, Vice Chair. Here we have an application for the demolition of agricultural buildings and the erection of 2 dwellings together with the associated works. As with before, I'm sure you've all read my report, so I will go through this in a whistle-stop tour. This is the location plan. It's currently an large agricultural building, which does benefit from a permission to convert to 2 dwellings. It was a committee, I think, last November. Here is the Google Maps image. We'll try and be experimental. And you can see it's just there, zoomed in. So it's Park Farm Stead, just outside of Mashall. These are showing the current barns to be demolished, inside and out. And then my report refers to an existing converted barn. So I've included these contexts so you can see this on the left-hand side is the barn to be demolished and replaced with 2 dwellings. And on the right is the barn that's already been developed, which this application takes some design cues from. And this is the farmyard from the front. You can see they've got a nice static caravan there. This is a site location plan. It's for 1 2-bedroom dwelling and 1 3-bedroom dwelling, modest gardens, parking at the front. Proposed elevations, floor plans, landscaping scheme. This shows what was approved previously under P. Just as a comparison. And these are the planning considerations. See that I'm recommending approval subject to conditions. I'll pass back to you, councillor, thank you.
Thank you very much for your short report. Okay, members, would any members like to make any comments? Councillor Coombs?
Just to sort out my confusion, are we going that this is a betterment?
That's, yeah, correct. So we're saying it's a betterment, and there's conditions relating to some of the sustainable measures, so air source heat pumps, and solar panels, etc., which we normally wouldn't condition. We're conditioning in this case to make sure it is genuinely more sustainable.
Any comments from any other members? No? Would a member like that? Councillor Bullen?
Right, only just to say, as it's 2s and 3s, that's the size that locals can afford to buy, isn't it? So, I think it's a good idea.
Thank you for that. Would someone, Councillor Knight?
Thank you, Chair. I thought we were questions, but if it's comments, I'm happy with this betterment and would move approval.
Okay, so you, is it approval? Is there a second to that? Yeah, Mark, Mr. Booth, Honourable Booth, okay? Is there any other amendments to that? No? All those in favour, please show. Is it unanimous? Okay, thank you very much for that, members, thank you. We get the postman.
Never really much for these.
I was looking back. Only one of us has packed go on board. It's gonna be fun. Really good.
Good France be in Spain though, aren't you?
Yeah. I'll send it to you, thanks for it.
Councillor Caroline Lever is sitting there. Just in case we hit 1 o'clock, if we're all in favour to just get past 1 o'clock if need be. Okay, we're all happy.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just very quickly go through some of the planning appeals. The Heel Lodge one you'll see is 2 different decisions. I'm just going to go through it once. Just to make sure we want to have some lunch. So the first one is application 80606. It's a retrospective application for a livestock shelter, now known as Hartbeer Farm, Buttercombe Lane, Ilfracombe. So you can see this retrospective. You can see that the livestock shelter is on the top photo there, and the bottom photo shows there's some sort of storage items being contained. The land that it serves approximately 6.6 hectares. And is directly to the north of the Target Trails, Ilfracombe. So we recommended, we have refused the application in terms of inadequate evidence to demonstrate there was a strong functional link to local agriculture, and that the field shelter sort of essentially wasn't justified. So the appellant has submitted some additional information to the planning inspector about the use and the future use of the appeal site. And based on the evidence that the inspector observed on site, he felt the building was appropriate for storage, although not necessarily for livestock in terms of it's quite small. He considered that the appeal site was not close to the appellant's home and there was a lack of other structures available. And that there was a small building and he felt that it was inappropriate for a countryside location. So he felt that overall it would not harm the character and appearance of the area and there was no conflict between policy DM04, DM14 and DM08A, amongst other things, to ensure that the character and quality of the landscape was respected. Do I have any comments on it? Not really. It is what it is, I think. As the night.
Yes, I have a question. Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Basically, if it's too small for livestock, yet that was the application, what's the logic there?
So I think that the appellant, as they are now called, put forward that actually it wasn't livestock, they got it wrong, it was more for storage. They lived quite far away from the area and, you know, that's needed. I think the concern from the planning officer and the lead officer for the North team is these small kind of shelters. They probably on its own aren't awful when the planning inspection comes around, but when we have a couple of these, it then does start to erode the countryside and the landscape. And we've been really clear in terms of new buildings in the countryside really should be properly justified because we do feel that there is future use which probably possibly isn't for agricultural purposes. So we have been more stringent on these, which I think is the right way to go. But obviously the inspector felt that the appellant had submitted additional information and that there was a justified need for a storage building.
I'm just, sorry, I'll just say on top of that, in that case, that the planning department weren't aware of that.
And there are other buildings on site for storage, so we didn't consider that an additional one for storage or livestock was justified.
And the costs is the next.
Yeah, so the cost decision, I think there was a pre-app where, I think maybe perhaps there have been some more favourable advice. But, obviously pre-app is our next bite-sized training. In terms of obviously, you know, pre-app is pre-app, it looks at the bare facts. The planning application obviously goes into much more detail, but there was no cost awarded. So the next one is application 804A7. So that was an access gateway or creation of an access gateway to the highway, to the land to the rear of Charlotte house in Bolton. So you can see that's the photo of a very attractive rural lane. And that's the site, the blue outline where the land I think is required to be maintained. I think the appellant had asked for a new access to get a tractor in and out, essentially. So Charlton House had actually been awarded a grade two listed building status by Historic England in July 2025. So I think that sort of formed part of the refusal. We felt that the new access would erode that sort of rural character of Charlton's Lane. As you can see, it's a very attractive rural lane. And would harm the local distinctiveness and local landscape, as well as the grade two heritage asset of Charlton's House. We also felt that potentially there would be an increase in volume of traffic entering and exiting the county road. And there were some issues with the disposal of surface water. So we recommended refusal. Pins felt the same, that actually the removal of a section of a hedgerow in this rural lane would erode the green character of the lane. This would exacerbate the profiling of the bank, and the creation of the access would be visually widen the carriageway. He did recognise that there was some weight in allowing a tractor into the field in terms of, I think the applicant or the appellant has some mobility issues. And obviously the site access would then allow sort of overgrown bank to be maintained. However, on the whole, he felt that the proposal would harm the character and appearance of the area and the listed building, and there would be some highway safety issues, which would conflict within the local plan. So, yeah, I hope you can see that, you know, how attractive that rural character of that lane is, and actually, you know, that harm we felt, particularly with the heritage asset, would outweigh any of the benefits of, you know, the impairment having mobility issues. I think it's important to say that actually the pins, I think quite rightly said, they hadn't actually shown that there was no alternative access that would be less harmful. So they hadn't really he hadn't really articulated what other options, was this the other option? So that was really clear in terms of what we should be looking for. And so that's, we felt was the right decision. Hopefully you did as well.
Absolutely.
Is that class as engineering ones in forming that?
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to get permission anyway.
Yeah.
I was under the impression you could actually unclassified.
So on an unclassified road, you can get access providing there's no engineering operations, doesn't constitute engineering operations.
Still engineering operations regardless.
Yeah, because I think there was quite a lot of engineering operations from this one in terms of the width and how it would, the creation of it in terms of if it constitutes development, because there was an engineering operation here.
Councillor Billy? There is a microphone coming. It's too quick.
You're not showing it there.
It's recorded.
Yeah. No, it's just that, so I'm asking, and if anybody widens a gateway out onto a unclassified narrow road like that, they are required to get planning permission, are they?
So if it's an engineering operation,
Yeah, I mean,
it's a little bit grey.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that if it's a classified highway, it's really clear. They need planning permission for a new access and widening. If it's unclassified, it just depends if there's an engineering operation. If it's an engineering operation, you need to go in there probably with a digger. And in terms of that, what if that then defines the development, then you would need planning permission. It is a bit grey, I must admit. There's lots of cases in law about if planning permission is needed or not. So if you do have something in your area, I would suggest probably just getting in contact with us rather than saying, this is it, this is what I go by.
I'll get in touch with you because this is they take the widening gateway, taking it back so you can drive off the road before you get out of vehicle around the gate and vice versa.
To be fair, we have allowed some widening.
Which is an improvement, yeah.
And some machinery, particularly agricultural machinery, it's got huge, isn't it?
Yeah,
Really wide. Forage harvesters, for example, are really wide. Track farmers probably or contractors find it really challenging to get in and out of traditional gateways. So there may be some circumstances where we would allow it, but I can assure you can see that this rural character and has a particular charm to it. And there is obviously a listed building equally next to it. So on this particular circumstance, we've refused it. That's not to say in other areas we might be okay with widening it or creating a new access for the farmer.
So my best option is to recommend them to approach you guys then.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of pre-up and just say, look, we need to widen our access, we can't get in and out by a tractor. And we would then put a view on that. If they need planning permission, then it's likely to be supported.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Okay. This is an interesting one. I mean, very similar to probably what we've just seen. So 78493, station of a mobile home and retrospective approval for the formation of access at Hill Lodge. So you can see the caravan or mobile home there. And Hill Lodge is outlined in red, so quite a small area. So the reason for refusal was the site is located in the countryside. And it's an open market residential use, which is not supported in terms of our spatial strategy. Then the case officer also felt that there will be unacceptable urbanising impact on the character of the rural location. And the personal circumstances wouldn't outweigh the harm in regards to 1 and 2. So I think from memory, it was a planning application, but it also was an enforcement notice. So appeal A means that basically it's appeal A means that planning permission should be granted. It's a live planning application essentially. So you can see that PINS went into quite a lot of detail, saying there's actually no dispute that actually this is not prescribed settlement where we normally allow residential development. I think there's also some harm in regards to landscape harm. However, you can see that he did go into considerable detail about personal circumstances, medical care, and he felt that those personal circumstances kind of outweighed that harm, and he put a condition on there in terms of those personal circumstances, and actually making although he would normally not do this, in terms of the PPG guidance, he felt it was reasonable and necessary for those exceptional circumstances to put a personal condition relating to them, that they live there, and then once, so they benefit from the planning permission because of those exceptional circumstances, and then once that use has ceased, then it would be put back. So personal circumstances do come into it, and I'm particularly pinned, I've had a couple over my career lifespan where personal circumstances have come in, the framework does allow for that. And, we do have to give weighting to that. For us, we didn't give weighting, I think possibly because they actually owned the property next door and sold it, which I don't think the planning inspectorate really considered. We felt perhaps that wasn't the best use of the planning system. So yeah, we learn in terms of, that there are personal conditions, and sometimes personal circumstances can outweigh or can have significant weight in terms of that planning balance. Yeah.
Personal circumstances could have been something to do where they needed something else as well.
So I think there was some disability issues here. I think some financial issues here as well. Yeah, I think it's all listed in the report about how he felt for this one. There was specific personal circumstances and needs that he attached considerable weight to in this decision.
Just in terms of enforcement, if you go back to that last bit, you're going to enforce against extra windows to the left of the front door.
Actually, I don't think it was conditioned. Was it conditioned? No. We will, I'm sure there's a condition in
Use of public funds.
So the last one, so this is the 75629, it's the conversion of existing agricultural building to dwelling at Greendale Farm, Hill Lane in Barnstable. So this essentially was refused due to it being within flood zone 3, and the introduction of a more vulnerable residential use in flood zone 3 is obviously likely to have some issues in terms of that safe access and egress. It was also refused in regards to inadequate mitigation. Although the council have, I think there's some more information submitted in terms of bats. So I think that refusal was dealt with, so that got taken out. So it was purely looked on about the safety of the future occupiers in terms of flood zone 3. You can see that he goes into considerable information about, I think he was saying that can they rely on third party next door in terms of safe access and egress, and he goes into significant issues about that. But however, he doesn't feel that it would be safe to be occupied over the lifetime of the development, and that there was no private housing land supply, but the impact on the flood risk and the risk of life would outweigh that significant harm, would outweigh any benefits in terms of our 5-year housing land supply. So the application was dismissed. So again, it's that flooding issue, even when we don't have to 5-year housing land supply and there's a real problem in the high street, that there is risk to life, and we do have to reweigh that in the balance.
Just one question on that. Did they have a drive into escape or not?
I don't think they did. No. Okay, so that's just a flavour of the planning appeals, mixed planning appeals we've had over the last month.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Item 10, there aren't any planning site inspections planned. So that's the end of the meeting. Thank you very much.